Hello and happy week 3 of digital learning. So we are going to go over our digital learning week 2 packet answers for science period 2 and 6. So follow along with me and have your packet out. Okay, so for week 2, we were supposed to read pages 125 through 134. If you are unable to read those pages or you had trouble answering any questions, follow along, fix your answers, or fill in your answers. But let's go ahead and go over the pages for that. So for page 125, they wanted us to fill in the blank and go over what we thought for each organ system would connect with this key. So for digestive system, food and waste processing system. For excretory system, it is similar. It is also food and waste processing system. For nervous system, it is a control system. For endocrine system, it is also a control system. For reproductive system, it is just E, reproductive system, so pretty simple. And for immune system, it is D, a defense system. Okay, let's look over the bottom part for our answer. So for the bottom part, it said identify an example of how the human body's multiple subsystems interact to perform a specific function. So to help us breathe, the respiratory, circulatory, and muscular systems work together. And it just said identify an example. So that's just one example. Your answer could be different and you could have other systems that work together. Let's go ahead and move on to page 126. So 126 actually had a lot of answers because it was going over all of lesson 1 and pulling it all together. So there was a lot to do on this page. So go ahead and check your answers. And I placed a star next to any questions that this was supposed to be the answer. If there is not a star next to the question, that means that your answer could be different than my answer, so it could vary. So if your answer does not match, then that's okay. But if it had a star and your answer did not match, please update your answer. So for number 1, it just wanted us to list the levels of organization in the human body from least to most complex. So we needed to have cell, tissue, organ system, and lastly, all those systems all those levels come together and form an organism or the human body. Number 2, it said it wanted to relate the levels of organization to a city. So what would you relate cells to and what would you relate all levels to? So for this one, I put the cells could be people who live in the city, tissues could be houses and buildings where people live, organs could be neighborhoods, and an organ system could be the whole city. Number 3, you had to have this as your answer. So for number 3, how does the respiratory system exchange oxygen, carbon dioxide between air and cells in the body? So the respiratory brings in the oxygen into the lungs. Oxygen diffuses into red blood cells. Blood carries carbon dioxide from body cells back to the lungs, where it diffuses the carbon dioxide into air. Number 4, you could have different answers for this. It just said how could you tell if your immune system was not functioning or working correctly? So maybe you could be sick and then you stay sick instead of getting better. So that could be one example. Number 5, if the brain is the control center of the body, why does it have nerves connected to your organs? Well, nerves carry the information to the body's condition and surroundings to the brain. So it needs to have those nerves there so it can send that message to the brain. Number 6. So for number 6, it said the thin layer of epithelial tissue in the small intestine works somewhat like a cell membrane. How does its structure relate to its function of the digestive system? So the epithelial tissue is very thin. It allows small intestine to absorb nutrients from digested food. Number 7. So for number 7, it says, how does learning about organs help us understand how organ systems work? So for this one, your answers could vary. So for me, I put each organ has a specific function in the body. Learning each organ's function will help us understand how they work together to carry out major functions in the body. if your heart were not functioning correctly, your circulatory system may not transport oxygen to the cells that they need it. And number 8, again for number 8, your answers could vary. So I went ahead and put, we are alive because of specialized cells that work together to complete a task. When cells are grouped and complete that same function, they make up tissue. A group of the same functioning tissue make up an organ. Organs work together to perform major functions. Cells are the basic structures for life and interact to carry out major functions. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So for page 127, I just want you to read this only. If you try to answer the questions or fill out the bottom part of the design challenge, awesome, but you do not have to. So for this part, you could skip that. If you already did it, awesome, but you didn't have to. Sorry if you did. And for the design challenge, if you wanted to do that part, you could, but you did not have to. Okay, for page 128, so now it's moving into lesson 2. So it was asking at the bottom of that page, in the space below, actually for this part, you needed to do it on the next page. But for this part right here, it says, if one body system were to stop interacting with the other systems, would you be able to do this activity? Explain. So would you be able to skateboard if some of the body systems were not interacting with the other body systems? So if we think about it, if your bones and your muscles are working together to help move your legs, move your feet, so you can skateboard, if all of a sudden they weren't working together, then no, you would not be able to do the activity because it's necessary for all systems to interact with one another. Okay, and if we look here, it had said what systems are working together so you could skateboard. So skeletal system, muscular system, respiratory, circulatory, and nervous system. So those all had to work together so you could skateboard. And then here, and if you were missing anything at all, go ahead and add it to your answer. Here it says what kind of interactions are there between people in your neighborhood. So if you were to look out your window and you saw your neighbors interacting, what would you maybe see happening? So you could see neighbors walking by, they smile and they say hi. Many other answers could be here. Right now, many of us are staying inside, so there might not be any interactions that you see. So just put that if that's what your answer would be. Okay, moving on. So page 130, they wanted us to underline the main evidence for how the body is organized into systems, how they interact. So it says, as you read, underline evidence that organ systems interact with each other. So this is one example of how the organ system interacts with another part. And then for here, it says, why do capillaries have to be so small? So they are so small so then they can reach every cell in the body because those cells in the body are also very tiny. And then here it says, how do you think a blocked blood vessel would affect an organism? So if flow is blocked, so if the blood flow is blocked, oxygen and food could not get to cells and waste would build up so cells could die and the organism would be harmed. So that's very important that we don't want any blood vessels blocked. So if somebody is having heart problems and they said there's a blocked artery, very, very detrimental to their health, and they could die because all of the cells are dying, and they need to make sure all cells are getting that food, getting that oxygen so they can survive. Okay, for page 131, this whole part here is actually many different answers. So I did not want to put my example here. So pretty much anything you put, as long as you explained it well, could be correct here. So answers will vary. Do not put answers will vary because I do not want to see that. I want to see what you wrote. So anything pretty much could be the right answer. And then for this question here, use the term stimulus and response to explain what the sign is expressing. So looking up at that picture, so the hot food in the mouth is the stimulus. The response is to pull away the food from the face. So that could be just one example. You could have had something else. And we're almost to the end. So looking at page 132, for this question here, it said, what text on this page supports the idea that the endocrine system functions differently from the nervous system? So the endocrine system uses chemicals instead of nerves to control body functions. And then here you were looking at these two images and you were just trying to see what are the differences, what are some observations that you see. So these answers would vary, but this is just what I put. So for this one, there's smaller features on the person's face and the face is rounder. Then this one, the features are now larger, the face is less rounded, and you can see an Adam's apple has appeared. And almost to the end of this week's work. So for this one, we see someone that is swimming, and while we are looking at what they are doing, we are trying to see what systems are at play. So here for the food from the swimmer's breakfast has been broken down into nutrients and is delivered to cells. So we need the digestive system for that, and then the circulatory system because it's carrying all of that food nutrients to the different cells. Then here, carbon dioxide moves rapidly out of the swimmer's lungs. Cell wastes move into her blood and are filtered by her kidneys. So there's a few different systems at play here: excretory, circulatory, respiratory, and integumentary systems. And then here, the swimmer's brain interprets what her eyes see and directs her movements. So nervous system is controlling the body. Muscular and skeletal system, they have to work to provide that movement and support. Here, the swimmer's arms reach out to pull her through the water. So that means the muscular, skeletal systems are working, and they're working with the nervous system because the nervous system is controlling and helping to do the different movements with the muscular and skeletal system. Here, hormones move through the swimmer's bloodstream, stimulating her body. Systems work harder, so that's the endocrine system. And then the swimmer's breathing rate and heart rate increase, supplying more oxygen to her muscle cells. That means the respiratory, circulatory system have to work. Breathing goes with the respiratory system, and the heart rate has to take in that oxygen, exchange it for the carbon dioxide, so then it can also move the oxygen to all muscle cells. All right, we have reached the last page I wanted you to do for this last week. So up here it says identify some ways the woman in the second drawing might cool her body and maintain a constant body temperature. So you could have different answers here, but I went ahead and put maybe she could get a cool drink. She can remove a layer of clothing. So she has long sleeves on. Maybe she has a smaller t-shirt on underneath. That would help cool her down. Or maybe she could get a fan and cool herself down that way. So there's many different things she could do to cool her body temperature. And then down here, it says stable is a common word to describe something that hasn't changed much and isn't expected to change much in the future. Make a list of some things you have heard described as stable. So temperature could be stable, a person could be stable, a situation, a building, etc. So there's many different answers here. If you've had something different, that's fine, as long as it could go with stable. All right, so that is your reading, your answers for this last week of learning, of digital learning. So this week, I need you to read pages 135 through 144, answering the questions as you go through that. And next week I will post a video on all of those pages. I may change up and do 2 pages a day with smaller videos. If that's something you're wanting to see, please let me know. Either email me, leave me a comment below, or message me on Instagram. All right, hope you guys have a great rest of your week. I'll see you later. Bye.